Welcome to This Academic Life, episode 88. I am your host, Lucy Zhang. Today's conversation is with Dr. Laurel Kuxhaus, an accomplished bioengineer, educator, scientific leader, and a public servant who made the rare decision to leave a tenured full professor faculty position to serve in the federal government. I knew Laurel during my time at NSF. She gave me tremendous help and mentored me throughout the way. After her 4 years of working at NSF, she returned back to her home institution where she held tenure. A year later, she joined the NIH to pursue work that aligned with her commitment to public service and scientific impact. Less than a year into the role, during her probationary period, her job was among the thousands that the government terminated en masse of all the probationary federal employees. In this episode, we'll hear from her what it means to give up tenure, what it feels like to suddenly let go, and how she's navigating the uncertainty that follows. It's a conversation about risk, identity, and the human realities behind these institutional decisions. I'm so grateful she's willing to share her story at this moment, even as the next chapter is still being written. Hi, Laurel. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get started. I am so intrigued by your experience and life stories. So can you just give us a little bit more of your background and career path?
Sure thing. Like so many of us, I got my start in research as an undergraduate student. I was at Michigan State University and I learned about biomechanics as a way to bridge the gap between engineering and medicine. After that introduction as an undergraduate, I went on to study orthopedic biomechanics in graduate school. First, I did a master's in engineering at Cornell University. It was actually in mechanical engineering. And then a PhD in bioengineering from the University of Pittsburgh. After a short postdoc experience where I actually stayed in the same lab that I finished my PhD in, I became a faculty member at Clarkson University, started as an assistant professor, and eventually became the first woman full professor in the mechanical and aerospace engineering department. After that, when I had finally earned a sabbatical, I spent it as a Congressional Science and Technology Policy Fellow working on Capitol Hill for the year. Then I spent the next 4 years as a program director at the National Science Foundation, still while I was on loan from Clarkson. When my term at NSF ended, I went back to Clarkson for a year before giving up tenure to return to government work full-time. I started as a program officer at the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, in the summer of 2024, and am now, as they say, open to my next career opportunity since I was one of the many employees in their probationary year who are now out of a job.
My goodness, Laurel, I think you're a trailblazer in so many fronts. I didn't even realize, you probably told me this before, but you were the first woman who got full professorship in your department. That's amazing. You would think that all these years of promoting science and engineering in academics, we're still not there yet.
That is a whole separate podcast conversation.
Absolutely. You just mentioned that you had such a dynamic career from faculty at Clarkson to NSF and to NIH. What motivated you to step away from tenure and pursue a full-time role in federal service?
It was a tough decision. I had spent 5 years working directly in government, the one in Congress and then the 4 at NSF. And it really opened my eyes to the wide variety of roles that scientists play in keeping our nation's science and engineering enterprise up and running. These were jobs that weren't even on my radar when I was in school. On the policy side, I learned that it's a lot of work to craft good policies and funding opportunities. And on the technical side, I realized that I do apply my technical skills as a scientist and engineer in the process of deciding things like what gets funded or new policies that come down from government about things like data sharing. I really like that the impact of my work could benefit the entire research community rather than just benefiting only my own students. And I was attracted to the stability of federal employment. We think of tenure as being very stable, and it is, but government employment, historically, once you make it through your probationary year, then it's somewhat analogous to having tenure, and I was really attracted to that security. And of course, what really made me make the leap was that I had a job offer on the table that seemed like a great opportunity to come in and learn what it's like to work at the NIH. It's easy to think hypothetically, but it's not really a real decision until that job offer is on the table.
Yeah, I do remember during that transition period or the decision-making period, it was a lot of struggle for you. It's not easy to step away from tenure for sure. So what was your role at NIH and how did it align with your long-term goals when you took the leap from academia?
At the NIH, I was a program officer. I was a program officer specifically for the Bridge to AI program, which was part of the Common Fund in the Office of the Director. So many people know NIH for its institutes and centers. The Common Fund is one office that sits in the Office of the Director. I was really excited to join the NIH and learn another agency from the inside since I already had some NSF experience. And I really hoped to be able to strengthen my ability to collaborate across agencies by getting to know how two agencies that sometimes work together could collaborate better by understanding the inside baseball, if you will, of the NIH. I had worked across agency lines with the Bridge to AI program during my time at NSF. So I was glad to be working with some familiar people and also to be working in the AI space, which hasn't come up in this conversation yet. I don't know that I mentioned earlier that when I spent my year on Capitol Hill, one of my big achievements was drafting a bill about AI policy. I'm more of an AI policy expert than a practitioner, but I was glad to be supporting the community. And because of that kind of foundational experience in AI policy, I was excited about this specific opportunity to bring together that background and apply it directly to the Bridge to AI program. And thinking about how that aligned with my long-term goals, I remember thinking I really liked being a program director while I was at NSF. I really loved that my work could enable a lot of cool science that I couldn't have done on my own, and also mentoring the community in the pursuit of all that cool and useful science. So I really liked those parts of the job, and I expected to have similar experiences at the NIH, just mentoring a slightly different community, in this case, the Bridge to AI community.
Wow, this is all new to me, actually. I have no idea. I was just listening to you. I can just imagine how impactful this work would be or could be. You think about all the AI, which is, I believe, one of the current priorities as well. So how that is related to health and sciences as we as a society moving forward. The importance of this work. So in terms of this federal role, and you mentioned about being in this probationary period, of course, we all know that probationary period comes with some structural precarity. How clearly were you aware of those risks when you first joined? And were there any other cases that in the past where probationary employees were let go for non-performance issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's pretty widely known amongst people who are looking for government jobs that there is a probationary period for most positions. It's often 1 year, sometimes 2 years, depending on the exact job and the job classification and how you're hired. So it's known that probationary periods are a thing. There can also be probationary periods after people are promoted into a different job, even if they've been at an agency for a long time. But that's a whole separate can of worms. As far as thinking about how it was communicated to me during the hiring process, it's one of those things that is presented just as part of the fine print. So nothing to worry about. As long as you don't do a terrible job at your job, then you don't have to worry about it. I remember talking to my boss about it, and he said, you don't have anything to worry about. That's because even if you got a bad performance review, we'd have to put you on a performance improvement plan. So really, it felt, the only way you can really screw this up is pretty egregious underperformance or any other associated malfeasance issues, which we can all imagine are pretty rare. That was the way I approached things. I anticipated that things would go well. And in fact, what those who are academics might say, why didn't you just take a 1-year leave of absence from your university to get through the probationary period? But before you onboard to the NIH, you actually have to prove that you've resigned, and they're explicit that it cannot just be a leave of absence. So it was a little bit of a surprise when all of the probationary employees were rather unceremoniously let go, especially to give you some context for how rare this is. If you look at the publicly available documents from OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management for the government, and you dig down into the weeds and look at the codes they can list for dismissing probationary employees, that there's only 2 possible reasons in their systems and documentation that probationary employees can be let go. And these are basically amount to either poor performance or severe misconduct. So there's not a path for, we just decided your job is not in the public interest anymore. And before all of this recent activity, I didn't know of anyone that had not passed their probationary period. It seemed one of these formalities more than anything else.
Do you know if this is the same exercise that's made in other agencies besides NIH?
I don't know for certain, but I have heard across government, because the codes from OPM are the codes government-wide. Each agency has handled things slightly differently with, I would say, similar results.
So you received this letter of termination letter on Valentine's Day on February 14th. Is that right? I remember that's around the date that I heard on the news.
Yes. So the quote unquote Valentine's Day massacre.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you received this letter from OPM, I believe it's not directly come from NIH, is that right?
Yeah, so the letter I got actually came from Health and Human Services, or HHS, which is,
okay.
structural lesson in government. Some of what we think of as agencies like the NIH and the CDC and the FDA are actually operating divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services. Other agencies like NSF, for example, are independent agencies. So it adds another layer to the organizational chart.
Well, yeah, I was learning something new here.
I know, all this education.
From a commoner, we call the people like you were doged, whether you call it fired, doged, or rift, reduction in force, or whatever it's called, you were let go. Can you share with us what the process looked like from your perspective, like how it was all explained to you, how it all landed personally and professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's a lot of words to describe what has happened, some of which would probably be inappropriate to say on the podcast. But there are lots of things happening right now. I sometimes say I got doged. I sometimes say I was let go or laid off. There are also reductions in force, and that's capital R, capital F, reductions in force. That is a term of art. And it's fascinating that some of the lawsuits floating around in response to this are arguing that the probationary employees being let go while it wasn't a reduction in force by name, it sure does look and smell like a RIF. So maybe it is, but that's a whole separate conversation. So back to your question of how this landed. On Friday, February 14th, we knew there were threats of layoffs. We didn't think that they would happen so soon. It felt just another Friday at the office. And there was suddenly an 11 a.m. meeting that landed on my calendar and the calendars of 7 of my fellow probationary colleagues and our supervisors. And we were called into this meeting. I don't remember if it was on Zoom or Teams, because one of the other changes recently in government is that we're supposed to use Teams instead of Zoom. But we were told that our office leadership had just been notified that we would all be let go that very day. So this was before lunch on Friday. They communicated really clearly to us that our office leadership, so our supervisors, our second level supervisors, were not involved at all in the decision-making process, and that this had nothing to do with our job performance. We had all recently been through our annual evaluations, and all of them were quite good. And they said they said they shared everything they knew, which was that we should expect to get termination notifications coming from HHS, coming to our NIH emails between 1 and 4 p.m. that day. And that shortly after we got those notices, our computers would lock. We wouldn't be able to access them anymore. Yeah, so it was stressful. Everyone was pretty upset. You know, it's hard to be in a meeting when even the upper leadership of the office is in tears. And there were 8 of us. Some of us were physically in the office that day, others were working from home. So we sat around the office all afternoon knowing that these notices were expected to arrive between 1 and 4 p.m. and trying to think about, okay, what can I do? What loose ends could I tie up in my work? Should I write a transition memo to pass off things to colleagues? Are my files for our working groups all in a place where our colleagues can access them, which is a lot to think about when you're shocked. And 4 o'clock came and went. And it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I had thought through the afternoon, I thought, should I walk home and drive back in my car so I can clean out my office today? But I was worried that the email would come in the short time that I was away, then I wouldn't be able to get it. 4 o'clock came and went. Nobody had gotten, their letter yet. So we thought maybe we've been spared. I don't know. We checked in with the leadership. They said, oh, we hear that they're having trouble sending out the notices. Don't worry, you're on the list. You will be let go. So around 5:30 on that Friday night, I gave up sitting in my office and said, I'm just going to go home. And like many people, opened up my NIH computer and hit refresh on the email until it was well past bedtime. My colleagues all did the same. And our notices finally arrived just after 8 p.m. on Saturday. So another whole day of hitting refresh on the email. And when these letters arrived, they contained a bit of good news with the bad news. The good news was that NIH was giving us 30 days of paid leave before we'd officially be separated. So it was a relief to know that we'd still have a month of salary, another month of benefits before we were let go. So that was, I don't want to call it a silver lining. It was more of a consolation prize. So how did this land personally and professionally? There've been so many twists and turns since then, some in response to the numerous court cases that are making their way through the system. For example, just after the end of that month of paid leave, so we're in mid-March now, we were notified that our leave would be extended until further notice, presumably in response to a preliminary injunction from one of the courts, which was great because that meant paycheck continued, although we really would have liked to have been able to go back to work. At some point in there, my health insurance premium stopped being deducted from my paycheck, and it was hard to figure out how to fix that since I didn't have access to my NIH email. And also since by that point, there had actually been reductions in force or RIFs, and a lot of NIH's HR staff had been RIFed by that point. And it was also in that time period, one of my paychecks was higher than usual because I'd gotten a bonus for my excellent performance at my
Oh
job
my
based on
How
that
ironic.
performance review that my boss did in January. So there's a lot of swirling around. And then on May 8th, which was fairly recently, so one day before another injunction was expected from yet another court case, I and many other probationary employees from NIH were fired by the old-fashioned letter in the mail. It was
Wow.
an interesting way to do things. Of course, the letter didn't arrive to my mailbox by May 8th because it was postmarked on that day. And it was a little bit of cognitive dissonance because there was this letter that said you're being terminated. And you actually, in fact, at that point, you have been terminated on May 8th because I have it right here. I can read it. It says, Dear Laurel C. Kuxhaus, you are currently serving a probationary or trial period, and the Department of Health and Human Services has decided that your continued employment does not advance the public interest. As a result, your employment is terminated effective on the date of this notice. And yes, and also included in that package was a copy of the court order that ordered HHS to tell the probationary employees that they were not being fired due to performance. However, when we got our departure paperwork, so the official personnel action that says why you were fired, they were all coded for poor performance because there is no code for this situation.
That's what I remembered initially
Yeah.
when everybody was told
Yes.
to let go. The reason was the performance issue.
Yes. So really, this all feels like whiplash because we
Yeah.
were let go, but then kept on as administrative leave. And I used to joke during that time period that I was employed in the style of Schrodinger because I had a paycheck, but no job.
So you had already returned your laptop, of course, by this,
Yes,
like
I
during this
returned my
entire period.
Yep, I returned my laptop because I was instructed by my office leadership to return it in late February after that first notice. And even if I had kept it, it would have been useless because after we received our termination notice, the first one in February, then we were locked out of all systems.
Wow, what a mess.
Yes, what a mess is a great summary.
So, with this kind of career interruption, especially so soon after giving up your tenure, I would assume this is incredibly difficult. How have you been making sense of all this?
Yeah, it's hard to make sense of this and so much else that's going on. It's a huge loss to me since I voluntarily gave up my identity as a professor and then have just had my identity as a program director also stripped away. Part of me knows that this is completely illogical. I've heard it verbally and in writing from my supervisor that I was not fired for poor performance, but I have this piece of paper that says I was. And then I have another piece of paper that says my job is not in the public interest. And, I don't know that I agree with it. I know it doesn't make sense. I know that nothing I did caused it, but my brain is still trying to overanalyze and figure out what went wrong. Sometimes part of me wonders if I had been able to onboard sooner to the NIH, if I might have made it through the probationary period, although then I might have been riffed, who knows. But it takes a long time to get hired by the government. I was pretty quick, and it was 6 months from the initial offer through the background checks and the back and forth before I could actually start. So it's 6 months of investment to start a job that I worked at for 8 months before I was let go. That's a lot. And like we were just talking about, it's a real roller coaster. Lots of those of us who either are in government or were recently in government are just feeling the whiplash of the roller coaster. And it's interesting and exciting and hard to think about what's next. Part of me still wants to work in government, but I know it's really challenging right now. So I think I should find something else to do for at least the coming 3 years and 8 months or so.
You're feeling it, like it's
Yeah.
so hard that you've lost the trust in in the system, and it's
Yeah.
hard to go back to
Yeah,
when you lose that trust.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, how do you think these kinds of disruptions shape you professional identity, like both how others perceive you and how you see yourself?
Yeah, I don't know how others will see this. You could ask someone else how they see this. I've had a lot of expressions of support from colleagues near and far about this. I think everyone knows that this is part of a widespread problem that's happening across government, and hopefully they all know that it's not a reflection on my performance. I think that people know that. I'm not sure that the job application systems that you have to fill out, and of course they want to know why you left your last job. I don't know that those systems know this yet. I think ultimately this time is going to be a test of resilience. I would love to know how it would end, or at least how long I'll be living off my savings. I do think that someday this will be an inflection point in the broader arc of my career. I hope it's a little bit of a blip, but I'm not sure what the future looks like. I feel really fortunate that I have a CV full of experiences that could let me move to a variety of positions, whether that's at an academic institution, in a scientific leadership role, or a nonprofit, or even an industry position for a little while. Sometimes I feel resilient as I get excited about all of the future possibilities, but usually shortly after that, I get a rejection in my inbox. So that squashes that.
I don't know about professionally, but just hearing everything that you have gone through and also knowing you, like resilience is the first word that came to my mind for sure. And this is such a character building exercise, and certainly you have already many traits that you be on the way to success. So you're currently navigating the job market again, like you mentioned. Are there any surprises or anything particularly hard or different things that you have tried as you re-enter the workforce?
Yeah, the job market is really different now than it has been recently, as I've been on the job market a few times in recent years, including just last year. So I actually am glad that I had a reasonably updated CV to start from when all of this hit. The job market right now is really challenging because there's thousands of people who are also suddenly on the job market who have qualifications similar to mine. They're scientists who also have a background in policy. And so it's challenging. It's really competitive. In fact, I was on a job interview recently that ended with someone on the search committee emphasizing to me that the search pool was really competitive, including lots of candidates with both academic and government experience. And that didn't make me feel very good at the end of a long day of interviewing. Yeah, so it's an exciting time. It's a great opportunity for institutions to hire some highly qualified people. And then on top of that, there's all the usual challenges with being on the job market as a mid-career professional. The early career jobs, like tenure track jobs in academia or entry-level jobs elsewhere, are too small, either in salary or in scope. And some of the more senior executive level jobs want industry specific experience or prior executive experience, which I don't have a lot of yet. So it's challenging to find roles that are the right size.
I would imagine a lot of universities that are in the process of growing their research or identifying them to be research intensive universities, a lot of these places would need experience or expertise like yours.
Yeah,
I would hope so.
That's true. You asked about things that were surprising, and one thing that's been surprising to me is that I've been applying pretty widely to a really big list of different types of jobs on the academic market for things like Associate Dean of Research or roles in the research development space, but also in the nonprofit space looking for program managers. So I think I'm trying to cast a wide net. I hope that doesn't make me look too desperate in the process, because really, as I think about what I want in the next chapter of my career, I realize that my goals are really to use what I've learned as a faculty member and as a government program manager to advance the nation's science and engineering enterprise. And there's a lot of different jobs that meet that criteria. Another thing that has been really surprising to me right now is how many people are using generative AI to customize their resumes and cover letters for each position. That was something that was not even on my radar at all a year ago when I was on the job market. Some people say it's necessary to get through the applicant tracking system so that a human will actually look at your application. I've also heard a lot of recruiters and people on the hiring end say that it's the handwritten or unassisted applications that stand out, because if everyone uses AI for their cover letters, then the recruiter gets a pile of nearly identical cover letters. Yeah.
Wow, this is all new to me as well. I have no idea that AI assisted resume writing is becoming a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's an adjustment. Yeah. And, I think another surprise, or maybe it's just a sign of the times in this job search right now, is how many positions I've applied for that have gotten pulled, or job ads that have been canceled before I could even apply. And I'm not talking about job ads that were posted 3 weeks ago and then got pulled. This is, oh, this job ad was just posted, I'm going to apply to it tomorrow. And I go look the next day and, oh, it's been pulled, we're no longer hiring for that position. So I think that's a reflection on the dynamic nature of what's happening in government, and people not knowing, and institutions just not knowing what is next.
Exactly.
Then there's also a category of jobs that sound like they'd be really fun and a great match for my skill set, but the salary is so low that it's not livable, like lower than a starting entry-level engineer. And
Right. Yeah.
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 You were mentioning about the scope. Usually salary is on par with the scope, and you might be overqualified for many of these positions that are out there.
Yeah, that's true. So there's, like any job hunt, there's ups and downs. You have to fall in love with the job to submit a strong application, and then fall in love with it again to have a strong interview, and then you get your heart broken.
Yeah, I'm sure one of those will come through.
I hope so.
So during this time, what kind of support, whether it's emotional, professional, or practical, have been most meaningful to you?
That is a great question. And I actually have a page and a half of notes on this one.
No.
Because so this is a really tough question. I've had a lot of friends and former colleagues that have been helpful in so many ways. Some of the most meaningful examples have been handwritten notes from my former colleagues, especially the notes that acknowledge specific contributions I'd made in my short time at the NIH. Some things got mentioned in those notes that I wasn't even sure anyone had noticed. So that felt validating. I guess the takeaway there is the old adage about telling people you appreciate them and their work in the moment, otherwise they won't know. I've also found a lot of support from our professional societies. I was surprised early on how much I leaned in to professional societies like ASME, that's the American Society for Mechanical Engineers, BMES, so the Biomedical Engineering Society, and ASB, the American Society of Biomechanics. Yeah, so all of our professional societies have job boards. Some of them are better than others, but a way of staying connected and preserving my professional identity has been really helpful. I've been able to get engaged with the local chapter of ASME and help them plan events, which has helped keep that part of my identity active. I'm a guest editor for a special issue of the Journal of Biomechanical Engineering, so a process that's ongoing. Helps keep me active in the biomechanical engineering space. Those kinds of things, they don't help with the economic burden of being laid off, but they at least keep me professionally engaged and give me something to talk about, and regular contact with humans in my profession is helpful.
Absolutely.
thinking of this question from a different perspective, thinking about what things have actually been helpful for me from family and friends. I had a friend who lives far away say, "Oh gosh, this is terrible. Is there a bill of yours that I can take off your hands for a few months? Maybe that water bill that only comes once per quarter and is about to come in the next few weeks." I thought that was really nice because it was a specific offer to help with something and help ease the economic burden of being unemployed. I've had a lot of friends also say, "Oh, would you like to chat about some tips and tricks I learned in my recent job search?" Was helpful, more helpful than those well-intentioned friends and family members who will send you a link to a job because they think it matches your professional experience, but it's actually so far off base. We've all got those helpful family members who want to do that. But yeah, I've also found a lot of support in peer groups, whether that's peer groups of others across government who were let go, or peer groups within my technical field of biomedical engineering, and sharing information, especially for things, how do I get these documents from NIH that I need to file for unemployment? So those are good. Some of my music playing friends have been very generous in referring me to gigs that they had to turn down. I know music is my side hustle, and I'm a performing classical musician, and I've appreciated those referrals to have a little bit of structure in my calendar and a few dollars in my pocket. I will say I was in a webinar near the beginning of all of this where the career coach's advice was, maybe now is the time to start up your side hustle. That's when I'm like, I got that. It'll pay some of the bills, but not all of them. So yes.
Yeah, for our listeners who don't know about this, Laurel is a very accomplished oboist. I had the privilege to have heard her playing in a few different occasions. It was really phenomenal. So I'm glad those hobbies have paid off in some way.
Yes, a friend of mine who's also a musician but full-time said to me, she said, "I never thought I would say this to anyone, but it's a good thing that you're a musician so you can earn some money while you're unemployed."
Oh, it's sad, but it's true.
Yeah, and I think in this situation, if you know someone who's been recently laid off, all of the usual advice about helping people who are grieving still applies. Make sure they actually want to be helped, and you can ask them what they need, but people who are in a crisis are not always good at recognizing what they need. So it can be complicated, but sharing your experience, sometimes showing up with groceries is good.
So looking forward, even amid all these uncertainties, are there values, goals, or priorities that you're holding on to as you consider what's coming up next?
Definitely. First and foremost, I'm holding on to wanting my next role to serve the research community, whether that means the community of biomedical engineers or even broader than that, like all scientists and engineers in the country. I noticed that I've definitely got a preference for roles that have a strong mentoring or education component, but that would also allow me to apply what I've learned both as an academic and as a civil servant. In general, this means something different from the run-of-the-mill faculty position, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of positions that can satisfy my desire to use what I've learned to help the nation. I'm trying to avoid having to pack up my house and move yet again, but I also realize that might be inevitable because the local job market here in DC is pretty flooded right now.
So if someone listening to this right now and they're going through their own version of unexpected setbacks, what would you want them to hear from your experience?
I wish I knew. Yeah, I should say I'll let you know. I'll let you know when it's over what I learned from it. I'm still learning. One thing that's been a little surprising to me in the learning process, as I've heard many stories from other people about how they enjoyed their unemployment time because they got to think really deeply about their own values and their goals and decide what they really wanted to do next. I'll agree that some of that has happened for me, but I guess I got the impression from talking to others that they would sit at their desk or sit somewhere quiet and think deeply for hours on end and then make a decision. So more like meditative. I've had some of those insights, but they're more like a series of small insights. Something will crystallize on my brain while I'm out for a walk. Oh yeah, I do want my next position to have some sort of education or mentoring component. That's why I'm more attracted to this job ad that I saw than that one. So that's been interesting. I think for others going through unexpected setbacks, lean into your networks and your professional societies, even if it's hard. It does feel terrible to reach out and say, I'm unemployed right now and I don't quite know how to navigate this. One thing that I did in anticipation that something like this might happen in late January when there were some rumblings, I talked to one of our former NSF colleagues, and she shared with me that she had made a list of the people that would be her first calls if she got fired. So people in her networks who she thought would be useful to her in job hunts. And I said, that's a good idea. And when I went home that night, I made myself a list. And it was really great to already have that because I knew, first thing I should do is tell these people I'm unemployed and see if they have any connections for me. And those were hard emails to write. They all led to not a job yet, but they've led to other connections and other ways to stay involved with the community.
Yeah, so if I am to summarize what you just said, there are really two things that stood out to me. One is to have a community. You will need all those networks that you build over the years and all those connections that would really help you continue to grow, and hopefully also opportunities that would come. And second thing is to use this chance to reflect and to understand what you want the most and what values you would like to keep and to move forward. Before we wrap up, Laurel, what is the best place where people can connect with you?
I always enjoy connecting with people on LinkedIn, but I tend to only connect with people that I actually know in real life on LinkedIn. I also have a website. My website is laurelkuxhaus.com. That's Laurel, Kux like X-ray, Haus like Sam.com. And there's a contact form or email address on the website if anyone wants to get in touch with me by email.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, Laurel, for sharing such a powerful personal story with me and with our audience today.
You're welcome. I was glad to be here.
Thank you. If today's episode resonated with you, whether you've gone through a job loss or weighing a career leap or working inside the system we just talked about, I hope it offers some insight and solidarity. I want to thank Dr. Laurel Kuxhaus not just for sharing her story so openly, but for the resilience and integrity she brings to every stage of her career. It's not so easy to speak publicly in the middle of uncertainty, but she did so with clarity, honesty, and strength. The scientific community is so incredibly fortunate to have leaders like Laurel. People who lead not just by position, but by example. Her voice, her value, and her work continue to matter. You can find more episodes of This Academic Life anywhere you find podcasts. If you like what you heard, please leave a review. The more honest review we get, the more it is for others to find our show. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay positive.